I'm gonna show you 5 of the worst spots to bluff in all of live poker. Then I'll show one adjustment I might make in each hand to shift it from a horrible spot to bluff to a pretty good one. For context, my name is Marc Goone. I played poker full-time for over 5 years. I started at $1, $2, worked my way up and played as big as 200, 400, and netted over 7 figures along the way. All right, without further ado, 5 of the worst spots to bluff in all of live poker. Number 1, when the board is static and dry. So what does static and dry mean? So wet versus dry, I think, is a concept most people are familiar with, so we'll start with that. Wet versus dry simply means, are there a bunch of draws available on the board? If yes, the board is wet. If no, the board is dry. Static versus dynamic simply means how many turn cards are going to change the nuts. If more than half the turn cards are going to change the nuts, the board is going to be more dynamic. If less than half of the turn cards are going to change the nuts, the board is going to be more static. So let's talk about these static dry boards. All right, so let's jump into the first example here. All of these hands are 2-5 and 1K effective unless otherwise noted. So we're going to open 10-9 of spades on the button. Villain is going to call in the big blind ace-7 deuce rainbow. So the most static and dry of the flop textures. And as you know, I'm a big proponent of range betting in single raise pots heads up. And we're going to talk about why this board may be an exception in a little bit. But first, let's walk through the hand. Villain is going to check it over to us. And we're just going to start off with the default here, range bet. And I want to choose a size where they raise off their strong shit and call with their weak shit, and usually that's around 1/2 pot. So we go half pot here, they're going to call. The turn is an 8, we do pick up equity, and this is a blank. And when the turn doesn't change the nuts, usually, yes, they're going to be capped. Well, here's the problem with choosing this big size on the turn in this spot. On a board that's this static and dry, do we think villains always raise off a hand like pocket 7s on the flop? No, probably not. Do they always raise off a hand like pocket deuces on the flop? No, probably not. Do they always raise off a hand like ace-7 or ace-deuce on the flop? No, probably not. So the problem with going with this huge size on the turn is on these boards that are super static and dry is the villain is actually uncapped. They're just not as incentivized to raise off their strong hands on this flop when we c-bet small, as opposed to a dynamic wet board. When we overbet this turn, villains are probably just gonna call again if they have a set or 2 pair here. So the big size on the turn, not great when the board is static and dry. All right, well, what if we go smaller on the turn, right? We give them a chance to cap themselves. We give them a chance to raise off their ace-7, ace-deuce, pocket 7s, hands like that. So we go a little bit smaller on the turn, and now villain just calls. We went smaller on the turn, and does villain always raise off their sets and 2 pair in this situation? No. It's going to be at a higher frequency than when we overbet, but they're still going to have hands like ace-7 and ace-deuce and pocket deuces sometimes. And if we put in a significant overbet here, we're still gonna run into 2 pair and sets. And if we don't overbet here because the pot is so small, we're just gonna get snapped off by ace-jack and ace-queen. So we're in kind of a conundrum here. So how do we adjust in this spot? How do we make it profitable to bluff? So starting from the flop, this is gonna be one of my exceptions, and it's gonna be one of the only spots, single raise pot heads up, where I don't c-bet. And the reason I'm not going to c-bet is for the reasons you just saw. We're just not going to have as many profitable barreling opportunities across turns and rivers, particularly with low equity draws and air. By checking back here on this flop a large percentage of the time, what's going to happen is villains are going to show us what they have on the turn. If villain has a hand like a strong ace or a set or 2 pair, they're usually going to come out and bet for a big size here. Even if they check this turn one more time to trap with a set or top 2 pair, since the flop went check check, now they're terrified that the pot is small, and if they don't check raise now, they're not going to be able to get value. So if they just check call this turn, now we can be a lot more confident that they are capped getting to the river than if we triple barrel. The 2 biggest things that drive people's decision in poker are fear and greed. So when we check back the flop here, villains are much more likely to either bomb the turn or check raise the turn when they have a big hand, just because the pot is so small and they want to start piling in money. So now villain checks to us on the turn, and my general MO in these spots after checking back the flop is to use a pretty big size, because what is villain's range when they check the turn here? Well, it's going to be some air, right? Just some give ups that are going to fold if we breathe on the pot, but it's also just going to be a lot of showdown value. Pocket 5s, pocket 6s, 7x. And I think a lot of the showdown value after the flop goes check check is going to call one bet no matter what. So we want to put in a pretty big bet here to target the showdown value. And now we can blow them off all of that on the river, provided they just check call on the turn. Now we know the best hand they have getting to the river is probably going to be a hand like single pair ace X, and I feel pretty good knowing that their best hand is going to be 1 pair getting to the river. We can just use a massive size on the river to get all the single pair hands to fold, fold after we take this flop check back line. So I'm going to go big on the turn, and then, provided they do call the turn, I'm going to go massive on the river, knowing that we have capped them in this line. All right, guys, real quick, if you're enjoying the video, we've got a new editor named Marco. He's a poker player first, not an editor, and he's telling me it's a little bit strenuous, but here's what he told me. If you subscribe to the channel, pull out your phone, show him you're subscribed. He will kiss you. He'll give you a big smooch on the lips. Do it for Marco, our new editor. Please subscribe. Thank you, guys. Number 2 bad spot to bluff, when we are out of position. All right, so this hand, we are in the cutoff. We're going to open the king, queen of hearts, and the button the villain is going to call. Again, 1,000 effective here, and we go to a flop, jack, 9, deuce. Look at that sweet baby there, my favorite flop in all of poker. If we start off with c-betting, do you think people in position, even on wet dynamic boards, are going to slow play more when they're in position, or they're going to slow play more when they're out of position? When they're in position, they're not scared of the turn to river going check, check, because they get to put in the last action. If we were the button and they were the big blind and we c-bet half pot, they're going to raise off pocket 9s or jack 9 suited or pocket deuces almost all the time. But when they're in position here, I'd say the frequency of them raising off their good hands, even if we bet small, goes way down. We just don't cap them all the time. That's okay. So we'll start off with a c-bet, they call. Now we go to the turn. So we need to bet small again because they're in position. So we need to cap them. So we're going to bet small here on the turn. The villain is going to call. The problem here though is by going small twice, the pot on the river is just so small. Even if we go 2.5x pot here, people are going to be much less scared of a $400 bet or a $450 bet on this river with a hand like ace jack or king jack than they would be of an all-in jam. Let me show you my adjustment when we are in this spot from out of position. I'm just going to check my entire range. Why? Villains generally make 3 mistakes when you check your entire range to them in live poker. Number 1, they overstab. Number 2, they telegraph their hand strength with their sizing. And number 3, when they check back the flop, they just don't protect their check back range with almost any strong hands. Fear and greed, they don't want a bad card to come if they have a very strong hand. And they're greedy, they just want to put in money right now. So when they check back the flop, they are absolutely capped. And this just gives us a massive green light to be able to bluff across turns and rivers. Because of those 3 reasons, I like to do a lot of checking on the flop when we are out of position. So I start off here with a check, villain checks it back. And to me, this just says, oh, okay, I now get to win this hand a large majority of the time. So we go to a turn, which is a blank. And on blank turns, I'm generally going to follow up with a lot of checking again. What is their range when they check back the flop? Well, they're going to have some air and some showdown value. And what are they going to do with that range if we check again? If they have a hand like ace 9 or pocket 10s or pocket 8s, once we check twice, it looks like we have a hand like ace king. So they're going to start putting in a bet here for value and protection with all of their showdown value if we check. And now the air portion of their range. You may be wondering, well, why is the air going to bet if we check here? Well, a lot of people don't want to start a 3-street bluff with no equity with a hand like 7, 6 of diamonds. But if we check the turn, okay, what does our hand look like? Ace king, ace high, something like that. Now they may start bluffing because we've shown weakness. I would say here, a lot of their air is going to bet, a lot of their showdown value is going to bet. So we're going to check on the turn. They are going to stab. We are going to check raise absolutely huge here. If they call, we are just going to follow it up on the river with a massive bet, knowing that they just don't have any strong hands here, right? Pocket 9s, pocket deuces, jack 9 suited are just always going to bet on the flop. Can we run into a hand like pocket 4s occasionally? Sure. But most of the time, their range is just going to be showdown value or air. Now, if you're playing against a passive villain, one deviation I may make on this turn is just doing a lot of overbetting ourselves. Checking range out of position allows our bluffs to play so profitably because we get so much information based upon either their bet sizing or if they check back. And when they check back, since villains are not protecting their check back range with almost any strong hands, we just have carte blanche to take away the pot on either the turn or the river. Number 3, the third bad spot to bluff in live poker, when the SPR is low. So we always need to be aware of SPR. Let me show you. All right, so in this hand, we are going to open 7, 6 of diamonds on the button. Villain is going to call in the big blind, starting off only 600 effective. Villain checks to us on the flop. I'm going to be range betting. So I go half pot, they call. On this turn, usually the question I'm going to ask is, are they capped? And yes, I think they are capped on this turn because they would raise off 2 pair and sets at a high frequency on a wet dynamic board. So usually when they are capped, the size I want to choose on the turn is big. So far, so good, right? So we're going to go big on the turn to target their Jack X, their flush draws, their straight draws that are going to be inelastic. They are going to call. We go to the river. River is a blank. And now let's put all the pressure on. They're never going to have 2 pair and sets. Let's put all the money in. Let's go all in. And oh shit, they snap call us. Well, what did we do wrong here? Well, we only left a pot-sized bet behind on the river. So if villain gets here with a hand like Ace Jack or King Jack, they're probably just never folding for pot when all the draws brick. So what adjustments can we make here? Adjustment number 1 we can make going back to the turn is just choose a slightly smaller size. So if we go 100 on this turn, it's still an overbet instead of 150, and villain calls, well look, now the pot is 282 going to the river, and we have 460 behind. This is going to put a lot more pressure on hands like Ace Jack, King Jack, Queen Jack in this spot. 460 into 280 is a much tougher bet to call. I think we're going to start to get folds from some Jack X here. The other adjustment we can make, say we did choose the big size on the turn and we get to the river with just a pot size bet back left behind, and say we've got a little bit of a stickier villain here, right? That's why we went a little bit bigger on the turn. The other adjustment we can make on this river is just bluffing very, very small. And you may say, why would you bet small on this river? Well, Jack X is never folding. True, but let's think about all the draws they get here with to this river. They could have a ton of ace high spade draws, king high spade draws, queen 10, or king queen, 10-8. And all of these hands we're losing to, and all of these hands are going to fold if we just breathe on this pot. So we could just bet quarter pot here on this river to get all the draws to fold and lose the minimum against Jack X. Plan what you're going to do on the river. Plan it ahead of time. Either go for that big scary river overbet and choose a smaller size on the turn, leaving that overbet behind, or know that on the river you're not going for the big scary bet. So go huge on the turn, targeting all of your draws that are just never folding. And now on the river, know that with only a pot size bet back left behind, you're just not getting top pair to fold. So choose the small size on the river to get all their draws to fold. Number 4, the 4th bad spot to bluff in live poker, when the river card changes the nuts. So let me show you. This one, we are going to open 7-6 of diamonds again, except now we are 1,000 effective, got a little bit more stack depth to maneuver. Half pot on the flop, choose a size where they raise their strong shit, call it their weak shit. There we go, they call. Turn is a blank. Are they capped? Yes, because they'd raise off their 2 pair and sets at a high frequency on the flop. Best hand they have getting to this turn would be a hand like Ace Jack most of the time. When they're capped, bet big. When they're uncapped, bet small. We go to the river and now they check. So getting to the river, they just don't have a lot of great hands, right? They don't have 2 pair, they don't have sets, and let's bet huge to make Ace Jack fold, right? Wrong, because the nuts changed on this river. They're gonna have a lot of flushes here, right? If we bet 8-10 here, sure, we're gonna get all the Jack X to fold. That's great. But what happens when we go 2x pot here on this river? We just get snapped off by all the spades. Ace X of spades, king X of spades, queen X of spades. So the mistake is on this river. Do we really need to go $810 to get Ace Jack to fold when the front door flush draw comes in? No, probably not. So here's the adjustment I would make. When this river is a flushing card, we can just go smaller. Choose the size to get Ace Jack to fold here. What size would I have to bet with pocket 9s here to get Ace Jack to call? Maybe 200? Maybe 250 max, right? We have to go relatively small with a set here to get called by Ace Jack, because Ace Jack's gonna do a lot of folding on this river. Well, let's use that against them. Let's use that against them and get Ace Jack to fold here and lose the minimum when they have a flush. So we think Ace Jack's probably folding for 300, 350. Let's just choose that size. And now when they have a flush, we don't lose 810, we lose 350. The adjustment on these nut changing rivers is knowing you don't need to pull out the big bazooka to get the single pair hands to fold. All right, finally, number 5 bad spot to bluff in live poker, when our opponent employs the bet check line. Let me show you. So in this hand, let's say our opponent opens from the cutoff, and normally I'm just playing mostly 3-bet or fold in this spot, unless the villain is a very, very strong pro. We've got a beluga whale in the big blind who we are super, super deep with, and we would like to keep that guy in the pot, and this guy in the cutoff is maybe just like a try and wreck who's not making nearly as many mistakes. We'd love to keep this beluga in, so let's say we do call here on the button. So we go heads up to a flop, our opponent is going to c-bet. We've got 2 overs, gut shot to the nuts, backdoor flush draw, we're going to call, and now a spade comes in on the turn. Now our opponent goes small. Well, now we've got even more outs, right? We've got the king high flush draw. We've still got 2 overs. We've got a gutter. We've got equity, right? So we are going to call here on the turn. Now we get to the river and our opponent checks. Well, we got here with king high. We got a bluff, right? They are checking this river because they have a hand like Jack X, or they have a hand like an overpair that is planning on check calling this river almost all the time. So what is the mistake here in this hand, and what should the adjustment be? Let me show you. So here's the adjustment I would make in this hand, and it would start off on the turn. Remember, the 2 primary motivations that drive our opponent's decisions in live poker are usually going to be fear and greed. So if they get to this turn with a flush, usually greed is going to override that decision. They're usually going to choose a bigger size. Now, this doesn't apply against very, very strong pros, but if you're playing 2-5 live poker, you're probably not playing against a very strong pro. So when they choose a small size on the turn, they just don't have a lot of flushes. This is just going to be strong Jack X, maybe sometimes 2 pair, maybe over pairs, hands like that. It's just not going to be a lot of flushes. I like to tell recreational players twice. You do not have the best hand. Excuse me, sir. You don't have the best hand. You need to tell them twice. Let's say we raise here. We put in a big boy raise on the turn, targeting their over pairs, targeting their 2 pair. And now we get to the river, they check, and we just put in all the money, knowing that they're most likely not going to have flushes when they choose that small size on the turn. Well, now in this example, we are going to get some big folds. We're going to get hands like aces with a spade to fold. We're going to get hands like ace jack or jack 9 to fold, because we have taken an extremely strong line and we have told them twice in no uncertain terms, excuse me, sir, your overpair is no good. Excuse me, sir, your 2 pair is no good. So if you're going to go for that bluff, you need to be putting in an aggressive action before the river if you're the pre-flop caller. All right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video on 5 bad spots to bluff in live poker, and 1 adjustment I would make in each spot to turn it from a bad spot to bluff to a pretty good one. Hope this helps level up your win rate and get you bluffing very, very profitably. Thank you guys, and have a gentle day.